Welcome back to the Real Slim Fatty Show. I am your host, Fady Wama. Today's going to be a fun story time. I have three stories from being in the trenches, running an outsourced CFO firm as a CFO, a couple people that tried to screw me, and a couple other stories that are pretty funny. So one day I got a call from a prospective client, someone I knew, and they asked me to look at their company. They were in trouble. They didn't know how much in trouble they were. They kind of were flying blind for a while. They were three young kids running this company. They needed someone to come in and figure out where their finances actually stood, where their cash flow stood, where the business stood, kind of what was going on. And so I walked in and I started asking a couple questions. And I was like, "Don't you have an outsourced CFO?" And they're like, "Yeah, we do, but we don't really get what we need from them. They don't really give us the answers, or they don't really give us a lot of stuff. So is there anything that you can do?" And I was like, "Yeah, for sure. Let me talk to them." So I talked to them, and the CFO was kind of happy to be like, "Oh, cool, dude, take the account. I don't really care." And there was basically no transition. There was no handoff. I asked him, "Send me your model, send me the cash flow, send me anything that you built." And there really wasn't anything there. And I looked at the stuff. I was like, "There's no way that this is a real CFO doing this work," because I had not been a CFO yet. This was way back when I first moved to Chicago, and I was coming off my outsourced CFO or my management consulting. I did management consulting in the oil and gas industry after Boeing, and I didn't really know what the hell an outsourced CFO was. And all of a sudden, people were like, "Yeah, this is my outsourced CFO." I'm like, "Okay, great. What does that even mean?" Turns out that this guy was a bookkeeper, and no disrespect to the bookkeepers. We work with a ton of them. I love them. And he wasn't a bad bookkeeper. And that's really the thing. He built a really successful bookkeeping practice, an accounting firm that was pretty successful. He had hundreds of clients. He had a pretty large team, 20, 30, 40 people, counting outsource and all that kind of stuff. The problem is at some point he just woke up one day and started calling himself an outsourced CFO, which usually happens. Bookkeepers, accountants, they'll just be like, "Oh, well, I'm an outsourced CFO," simply because everyone else starts calling themselves outsourced CFOs. And for them to keep the business, be competitive, they just start saying they're an outsourced CFO. You're doing the same work. You are charging the same. You're the same person all of a sudden, but now you're going from being a bookkeeper, controller, accountant to now you're being an outsourced CFO. The way that this guy built his firm was he got plugged into a couple incubators at local universities, and he built a pretty good book of business off of founders who didn't really know the difference between accounting, finance, bookkeeping, controllership, anything like that. Definitely not any idea what a CFO was. And nobody does at that stage. You're 19, 20 years old, 21 years old. You just built some cool idea. You're like, "Oh, maybe this is kind of a company." And then maybe it hits, and then all of a sudden you think you're building a pretty cool company, and then that's kind of there. And so he would be their bookkeeper first, and then that would just grow based on what he was doing for them. And so when someone comes to you at that age and they have a cool website or they have a couple resources and they say they're an outsourced CFO, you're not going to disagree with them. You're not going to say no, you're not. So you're going to believe them, and so you'll sign with them. And so he built a pretty cool firm doing that exact thing. And the problem was you're not getting a CFO. You're getting a bookkeeper that is spread over tens of clients, if not 20, 30, 40, 50 clients. And so the particular client was paying this outsourced CFO $3,500 a month. He also had equity in the company. He kind of did that structure where he'd do partial payment plus equity. And if one company luckily ever had anything, he'd make his money back 100 times. But that was kind of his thing because he worked with startups. When I heard about this, I was like, "Okay, cool. You have equity in the company. You should care." But it really didn't matter to him because he was working on so many different companies, so many different clients. They all had equity, or he had equity in all the different companies. So it wasn't that big of a deal for him. And so he stopped really caring. He was kind of checked out off this specific client. The client wasn't giving them the data, or giving him the data, giving him answers on what he thought he needed on whenever he thought he needed it. And so after a little bit, he was just like, "I don't really care. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to keep going after and asking for the same kinds of stuff." So he literally just stopped. He stopped updating the models. He stopped updating cash flow, stopped helping them on pitch decks, stopped doing the one thing that the company really hired him for. And that was to tell them what was happening from a financial perspective in the company. What's the cash flow? What's their burn? All the fun stuff that a startup needs to be looking at. And for me, the problem was the client had no idea any of this was happening, right? They thought everything was fine because the guy wasn't necessarily telling them anything wrong. He just wasn't telling them anything. And so whatever he told them was based on data from like 3 months ago and drips and drabs of data. It was never the full picture. He never actually understood the company as a whole, and he didn't really care to pinpoint the numbers as a whole. So from where the founders kind of sat, no news was good news. They're like, all right, well, we can keep running and doing the thing that we're doing. And their CFO, the one person that's supposed to have a pulse on their finances, who's supposed to sound the alarm, never said anything. So if there's no alarm, there must be no fire. And so he kept telling them, oh, yeah, you have like 9 months of runway. You guys can keep doing this. You're doing great. You're adding all this revenue. You're doing all this, whatever. They hired me because they simply had no idea. They weren't getting any answers. I took a couple weeks to build them a financial model. I sat there, built a financial model. The first model I built for them, I'm like, no way is this accurate. I rebuilt the model, scrapped it, rebuilt it. And keep in mind, this is back in 2015. I'm building this in Excel, scrapped it, rebuilt it, took a few days every single time. Then second time around, I was like, there's no way. I must be missing something. Gathered more data, asked more people. And I'm like, okay, let me actually rebuild this. And when I rebuilt them the model, the runway was not 9 months. The runway was less than 3 months. And they were burning way more money than they thought. And they were kind of heading into a brick wall running 10,000 miles an hour. And when I sat down with the three founders, I took a couple weeks, redid the model multiple times, sat down with the three founders, and they were like 24, 25, 26 years old at this time. They literally started this company in their dorm room. And I had to tell them, hey, sorry, the situation is even worse than you thought. You don't have 9 months. You have 3 months of runway. You have 17 employees. They all depend on you. Some of them are married, they have families, the whole nine, but you have 3 months. And these guys who have never been actually told a number, a hard number, are just kind of looking at me like, there's no way. What do you mean? And I walked them through the model. And I didn't kind of pull it out of my ass. I showed them the math. It's not like anything came up or the company was doing anything stupid. It was just the way that they were running the company without any real insight on the math. So for them, the person that they were paying $3,500 a month, that was kind of a big chunk of change for them, didn't really care enough to really go into and give them the full picture and be super proactive with them. What happened after that, the company didn't turn around. You can't all of a sudden have cash in your bank. Cash is a finite thing. It's either there or it's not. And employees started to feel the tension. They started seeing certain things happening. They're like, something's not right. And we didn't do anything official. The founders never said anything official, but all of a sudden, rumors started happening. And then, people started dropping like flies. One person would leave, the next executive would leave, the next person would leave. And they started leaving one by one. And vendors who hadn't been paid stopped allowing excuses to be the reason for delay. And they started filing lawsuits. The founding team, who had been, three of the closest friends, they literally broke up and they went their separate ways. The company that took years to build, and it was a really special company. I mean, they were grossing close to $7 million a year, disappeared overnight because they had no idea what they were doing from a financial perspective. And now you would think that the outsourced CFO that they had, that had equity in their company, would give a shit. He didn't. He was gone, literally gone like the wind, rode off in the sunset. And it honestly wasn't even a bad sunset. A little down the line, he continued to build a really good reputation, really good brand. He sold his outsourced CFO firm to one of the largest regional firms. And then he became the leader and partner of the outsourced CFO department at that accounting firm. So he was not only doing it for the startups that he was working with the incubator, now he was doing it at a large firm. And anytime that one of their clients needed, quote unquote, outsourced CFO services, he was their guy. He was the one that ran that team. And so he tried to scale it, tried to do all this stuff, but no one knew about all these horror stories. And I guarantee there were multiple, but when a startup goes belly up, no one really bats an eye. And so this guy banked on that, and he literally banked on it. I mean, he walked away with a large check after he sold his firm. And now he was literally doing and continues to do the same shallow work he was doing before, just with a bigger name, bigger logo, bigger clients. When people see the brand, they're like, oh, he must be competent. When they hear about his exit, they're like, yeah, this is the guy who's good. And that was genuinely the first time I really clocked this whole thing about what this episode about. You know, the person with the title that's supposed to keep you safe is very often the person putting you in danger. And the system doesn't necessarily punish that person. It's built for that person to not necessarily have accountability or take accountability for what they do. So that was really my first taste in the outsourced CFO world, which is why I have such a strong opinion about the outsourced CFO industry across the board. And jumping into the second story, this is one time that the title genuinely fooled everybody, and it fooled me too. So kind of a couple years after that, I'd been running my own outsourced CFO firm because I literally started it out of demand. Because I'm like, if these bookkeeping people, these accountants, they're running a firm, how the hell am I not going to run a firm? And so I'd just come off a full-time CFO, COO job with one of my clients. It was a telehealth company. We scaled them, did really cool. But I was like, this isn't for me. I can't keep running someone else's dream. And things were going really well. I was in a really good spot. And so when I got pulled into this telepharmacy company, I walked in feeling pretty good about my judgment, feeling pretty good about what I could bring to the table, which in hindsight is exactly the wrong way to walk into a room full of people you don't know yet. If you don't know the people, they probably don't have the best intentions for you unless you know that 100%. So the room that I walked into was the chairman of the board, a guy who'd built and sold a pharmacy chain for a boatload of money, like serious money. And he was the main money behind the telepharmacy. And he was the kind of the driver behind the scenes. But they also had a founder. So the founder was different than the chairman. It was a younger guy who had also exited out of a company who was worth, 20, 30 million. But he was kind of plugged in and he had a decent reputation. But they knew to scale the telepharmacy, they had to recruit a high level executive from that knew the pharmacy world. So they found one from Walgreens. The Walgreens guy is the guy who brought me in. I knew him through the ecosystem, through a couple different clients, and they're like, hey, you need to meet this guy. He'd been asking for an outsourced CFO for a while. I got connected to him. So you had two people. You had the founder of the company who didn't really care about the company. He wasn't that active in the company. He was wealthy. Then you had the chairman who really cared about it, but he cared about it in a weird way. He was super old, didn't really have much going on in his life. So he was hyper involved in the startup for no reason. Then you had, the Walgreens, this high level executive coming in, expecting that he's going to be kind of the person to take over the entire company and run it. What I didn't know was there was already drama happening in the company between the Walgreens guy, the founder, and the chairman. And I had zero idea. I was just the new token finance guy showing up thinking that this was a new client, new opportunity. Cool. This will be a cool way to build another pretty cool company. So the Walgreens guy introduces me to the other guy who's actually in the company already. He's the chief pharmacy officer. He was a pharmacist. The two of them laid out a plan, and they had kind of a nefarious way of laying it out. They were both feeling like they were getting screwed. After working together for about a month, 2 months, they came to me and they're like, hey, we're actually going to spin off our own telepharmacy company. We have 3 pharmacies that we want to buy and we can turn them into telepharmacies. And we need you to run finance and operations. This guy's going to run the pharmacy side. The Walgreens guy was going to run the executive role, funding, and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, shit, all right, this seems interesting. I still had my outsourced CFO firm. I still had my employees. I still had my other thing. I was like, but this sounds pretty cool. So they wanted me as the third co-founder. And at me, I just came off a full-time CFO, COO role. I was getting back into the consulting full-time myself. My team still was doing it, but I was kind of flattered. I felt good about myself. The thesis was good. These guys seemed like they knew what they were doing. And I go into the whole thing about it as naively as a person can go into anything. So what I couldn't see, because I had no idea, was that the Walgreens guy and the pharmacy guy were not building a company with me. They were using me as a pawn. And the whole quote unquote spin off our own thing was leverage against the founder and the chairman. So it was basically a way to go back to them and squeeze out more equity for themselves, because they had equity that they were going to carve out for me. And they basically said, well, if you're going to give this guy this much equity, we're going to go do this on our own. So the equity that they were squeezing more of was mine. And I was the pig for slaughter. And I had no idea about this. They had me running in there like a bull in Spain, blind to everything. And they knew me. If I see something, I'm running 1,000 miles an hour and I'm in it. And so they pointed me and I did what I do. I ran 7,000 miles. I genuinely felt like things were too good to be true. There was a time where I was like, why are they going to do this with me? And when they said, we want you as a third co-founder, 33, 33, 33, I was like, why? Like, what value do I bring to a telepharmacy? Like I ran a telehealth company, but you guys are the geniuses on pharmacy. You're a pharmacist. I think I worked at Walgreens as a super high executive. Like, why do you need me as a third co-founder? Like, maybe pay me as an outsourced CFO, have me there, but like, why do you need me as a third? But like, I I was naive and I went into it and I didn't want to accept the fact that they were trying to screw me. And so the coup that they formed, I thought was me and the other two guys, but the coup that they formed was actually against me. So they basically went to the chairman and they leaked the plan themselves. They told the chairman, hey, this is what our plan is, and we're going to do it with Fady. And on purpose. And they used it as a negotiation tactic. And then they cut me completely out of the thing that they recruited me into. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to work with them. I had no idea what they were doing. And I didn't really care. I wasn't even excited about it. They came to me and they're like, hey, do this, do this. We're going to give you this. I'm like, sure. I did not find out about the meeting itself. I had no idea that they were meeting. No one called me. No one told me about it. We had a meeting set in the morning, 7 a.m. at Soho House. We were all supposed to meet up, me, the pharmacy, and the Walgreens guy. I wake up at like 6 in the morning. As I do, I open my phone up. Slack says you've been logged out. Log back in. I'm like, all right. I'm going to try and log back in and says, sorry, your password is not correct. I'm like, well, what the hell? How's my password not correct? Then I go to open my email. Same thing. Hey, your email, you got to log in again. I'm like, what the heck? Go log in. Email doesn't let me in. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I started putting two and two together and I was like, can I log into the bank account? Am I getting fucked right now? And I go to log into the bank account. Sorry, the password has been changed. That's when I knew. So I'm sitting there, 7 a.m., literally still in my underwear, woke up on the phone, sitting on the side of my bed, and I realized I'm getting fucked. And I called the Walgreens guy because he was the one that brought me into the whole thing anyways. And I texted the group chat and I was like, guys, what the hell? No one responded. Called the Walgreens guy. He doesn't respond. I'm like, what the actual hell? And the guy's, I know he's on the way to see me. I know he's awake. He's ignoring me. So I assume that they were talking about like, holy shit, Fady probably found out. And then waited a few minutes. Then he finally calls me back. And when he called me back, he goes, listen, I was hoping that I could do this in person. And again, you learn a lot about where you actually stand by which passwords stop working and in what order. So when he called me for the first few minutes, he played dumb, acted like he didn't know what I was talking about. Oh, it must be something weird with Slack. I'll call the pharmacy guy. I'll do this. Must be some weird kind of glitch. And I let him run for a minute. I was like, dude, stop bullshitting me. Why are you trying to fake about some bullshit? And the second that I said that, he came clean. He dropped it and was like, listen, this is why I wanted to talk in person. I would love to still meet up with you. I said, fuck you, dude. I'm not going to take time out of my day to sit and talk to you and listen to whatever bullshit you're going to tell me. How'd you fuck me? Why'd you fuck me? What happened? And that's basically, what people say when the thing they did doesn't survive being said out loud over the phone. People are, oh, I want to talk to you in person. You don't get that privilege. Him and the pharmacy guy ended up going through with the existing telepharmacy company, the one that they were supposed to be spinning away from with me. Then a few months later, and this is funny, the Walgreens guy got fired. They replaced him. The coup ate one of its own. And the pharmacy guy stayed and he kept on running it. So I'm assuming he ran the same playbook to get more equity for them too. And then he did the same kind of shit to get more equity for himself. And he spun out the Walgreens guy and took over that chunk of equity. That was one of the funniest things that I went through that entire experience. I didn't want to be there. I didn't ask to be there. They came to me, they used me as a pawn, and I didn't know any better. I was so naive. I was like, hell yeah, this is kind of cool. But the saying is, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. There is no such thing as a free lunch. If anyone it comes and tells you that they're going to give you 30% of a company, 33% of the company, when you have really very limited value that could drive that amount of value creation for that, stop and think. Don't be dumb like I was. And it was kind of funny. So that entire experience was actually the straw that broke the camel's back, where I was like, fuck working with other people. I can't keep trusting people. I've gotten screwed over on this and this and this. And that was legitimately the final straw. I had called one of my employees and I was like, listen, I'm going to go all in on Clockwork. I had been building Clockwork in the background for a couple of years. And I was like, Clockwork was always the main vision. And I was genuinely done being the most naive person at the table of people who'd already decided what was going to happen to me. I was done letting people decide my fate. The funniest part of it is a couple years into Clockwork, the Walgreens dude slides in my DMs on LinkedIn. Keep in mind, this guy is the scummiest of scummy. He is one of those old dudes that thinks he's young, and he got fired from Walgreens, but acts like he got, promoted, or he left because he was too creative for them and he wanted to be involved in the startups and all this kinds of stuff, going through a divorce. That whole stereotype was this dude, skinny jeans, graphic tees, and he's like, an older guy. Nothing against older guys, but that was the stereotype of this guy. So he slid in my DMs after he had removed me as a connection, which, like, what are we, 5? Removed me as a connection, super friendly, basically acting like nothing happened. Like, hey, been watching Clockwork grow. It sounds so amazing. This is amazing. I'd love to talk to you about investing in Clockwork. He wanted me to know that he's a fan, all that bullshit. And I told him, I'm like, dude, never in a million years would I respect you or work with you again, ever. And I don't care how bad I needed you. And he disappeared exactly as fast as he showed up on the first time. And I have not heard from him since. He's literally disappeared from my entire ecosystem. And it was one of those funny kind of things. The people that were in that room had all the makings of something special. They had the pharmacy chain builder, they had the Walgreens executive, the serial founder, the exited, all this kinds of stuff. And all that was amazing. And I wanted to believe that was a really good character room. But that took me years to understand that the credential and the character have nothing to do with each other. And we just genuinely really want them to. I'm a romantic. I want to have faith in people. But just because someone has the credibility doesn't mean they have the character to back it up. And I learned that really the hard way. And this final story, it's a little different because by this point I'd learned my lesson and I got paid to go to prove it one more time. I was running Clockwork for a few years now. And one of the VCs that I always consulted for when I was running my outsourced CFO firm called me up and they're like, hey, can we get breakfast? And I was like, sure, I love meeting up with you guys. We met, and Clockwork wasn't fully into the market. I was a couple years into building the product. And if you don't know, I took 4 years to build the product. So I was in this and I was funding it from my checking account. So that was kind of that was the start of Clockwork. I'm 100% heads down on building the product. Didn't do consulting anymore. I shut down my firm, didn't even have the LLC anymore. And they came to me and they were like, hey, we have a portfolio company that's struggling really badly and we don't know why. We think we know, we're not 100% sure. They hired an accountant who still couldn't tell him what was going on. He was a young kid. He didn't really know what he was doing. The company's in the food space. They knew I grew up in a restaurant and they figured out that I can go and find something that kid couldn't. I was sitting there, I was like, no, I'm good. I don't want to get back into something. Like, my focus is 100% on Clockwork. But then they were like, we need you to do this. And I was like, no, I'm good. And then like, we absolutely need you to do this. And I was like, no, I'm good. And then when they kept asking, I'm like, all right, fine. I'm going to give you a price. And they're like, whatever you name your price and you can do it. And again, I'm funding Clockwork out of my checking account. And I looked at it and I'm like, wait, if I charge them 20 grand for a month's time, that gives Clockwork a good amount of runway because I'll just throw this directly into Clockwork. Exactly what I did. Part of me didn't want them to accept the offer. I was like, 20 grand for a month. Not a fucking chance would I accept that. But they were desperate. They wanted the work and they took it. And I was like, damn, but that's cool that I got 20 grand, but damn, now I have to go and do this work. So I said, fine. I said, send me all the financials. I said, send me the financial statement, financial model, the P&L, send me the cash flow, send me the balance sheet, send me the bank account statements, send me the credit card statements, every single thing. I said, send me every single thing that you have. And they were like, great, we're going to connect you to the guy. He's going to get you paired up. I'm like, okay, cool. I start digging in, and it genuinely didn't take long. At this point, I'd been running my outsourced CFO firm for 5 years, 6 years. I can kind of look at a P&L. I can look at a company and know pretty quickly where things are going wrong. So one of the problems was that it was sitting in the bank statements, actually. It was being hidden in the P&L. The founder was paying himself a lot more than he'd been telling anyone he was paid. So he was paying himself a salary through the regular payroll, but he was also taking distributions and he was hiding them not to get too technical. He was basically taking them out of two different spots of the company. So unless you're looking at the company as a whole, you're not going to necessarily catch it. He was also paying for his personal shit on the company card, buying himself stuff on the company's dime. And it was not necessarily super secretive and it wasn't super sophisticated. It wasn't some like grand scheme to screw people over. It's just, it needed someone who knew a little bit. And this is what I didn't know. The two partners that hired me to do this, they already knew something was going on. They were suspicious of the founder already. And they're like, something's not right. That's really why no one had looked, because the founder was friends with another partner at the fund. Two of them were kind of not necessarily covering for each other, but kind of covering for each other. The young accountant that they brought in, the kid who was supposed to catch all this, was kind of being walled off from half the business. And he didn't really have the drive or the confidence to kind of push back on, I need to know or see certain things, which, by the way, it's not the kid's fault. You put a 25-year-old in a room with a founder and a fund partner who are paying your salary, and they're both motivated for you not to find something. You're not going to find it. I don't care how good you are, who you are. And he doesn't have the standing. He barely has the job to actually get it through. So he's not going to push. They paid me for the full month. It took me a week and a half to find this. Presented it to the guys who hired me. Now is the funniest thing. The second I started laying it out, their faces were like, yep, yep, yep. They knew exactly what it was, and they knew exactly what I was going to tell them. They didn't hire me to discover anything new. They hired me to confirm something that they already expected. They kind of already knew it. And not necessarily that they wouldn't say out loud. They kind of couldn't say out loud unless they had the things geared 100%. And they knew that, again, I'm the bull. You put me at point, I'm going to go in and I'm going to charge and I'm going to figure out every single thing. I'm going to break through every single wall. And they needed an outside guy with no friendships to protect, no kind of ulterior motives to come in and say that the number was X or Y, and they knew it. So it's funny. It's the same job that I had with the dorm room founders 5-6 years prior to that. It was the same job that nobody at the telepharmacy wanted to do. Someone who will say the real thing in a room full of people with reasons not to say it. And that was one of the wildest things. So those three stories are really they're war stories. It's kind of funny looking back at all the different experiences that I've had. And if you've been doing this long enough, you've got your own war stories. And when I line them up, the thing that they have common isn't incompetence, even though, trust me, there's plenty of that. There's always going to be incompetent people, incompetent things, not necessarily for bad things, but the thing that they have in common is that every single client that I had, every single room, all these conversations, the most credentialed, trusted, accomplished, impressive on paper person was the problem. The outsourced CFO with the team and the incubator relationships, the Walgreens executive and the serial exit founder, the fund partner covering for his buddy. They used their title to disguise themselves, and it kept everyone from looking. I kept ending up in the same seat, the guy with no relationship to protect. I had no ulterior motives. I was hired or drug into the system to be used as a pawn. What I figured out is that the number is almost never the surprise. And that's kind of the funny thing. The cash position, the founder's draw, the runway, it's all just math. And math is very binary. The math is usually knowable months before anyone legitimately opens their mouth and says, yeah, the math is the math. The surprise is always a person, somebody who knew and had a reason to shut up and had a reason to hide their motives and had a reason to not necessarily be super truthful. And the reason this matters because if you're at a company or if you're running a company, you're about to hand your company to someone who tells you they got it handled, or you're about to hand your career to somebody who tells you they got you. They don't got you. They do not got you. Stop hiring the resume. Stop trusting the resume. Stop trusting the credentials. The resume, the credentials, all that shit is the easiest thing in the world to assemble. And it tells you almost nothing about whether the person is competent or honest. The accountant, the bookkeeper, the outsourced CFO, they had a great pitch. The Walgreens dude had a great resume. You put him in front of a room, he's going to impress them. The founder, he had 3 exits. None of it told you what they'd actually do when no one was looking. That's what I learned. The people who blew up those companies all walked away fine. The CFO went and had a multi-million-dollar exit to a bigger firm, got a bigger book of business. The pharmacy guy kept his company. He's a piece of shit, kept his company, got more equity. The skimming founder got fired. He got removed from his company, and his company does not exist anymore because now no one's going to fund him. No one's going to touch him because the world is a small place. People know if you're a shitty person, they will find out. They will know. And it's not a tragic ending that I'm building to. It's really just kind of the truth. The con usually works, and the guy running it usually skates away, usually walks away in the sunset. The only thing standing between a company success and the outcome is whether somebody who has no reason to lie is willing to look at the bank statements and say what's there. They're willing to look at the team and the career, the development, and say what's actually happening, not with some ulterior motive. And for most of my career, getting paid or not, that somebody was me. Now I just build the thing that does it automatically. So a founder doesn't have to get lucky enough to know a guy, know a bookkeeper, know an outsourced CFO who can tell them things in real time and answer the call whenever they call them. The most dangerous person in your company or who you're around is the one whose title makes you stop checking, makes you stop wondering what's going on, who this person is, or where they came from. That's when you get screwed, like I did in all my different stories. But those lessons are amazing. Those scars are why I can go into every single situation having known what could happen and how it could go down. This has been the Real Slim Fady Show. I'm your host, Fady Hawatma, and we will catch you next time.